Okay, so today we're going to learn how to solve the problem of when you set a machine into bobbin winding mode, but the needle bar continues to go up and down when it's not supposed to. It's a pretty simple four-step process. First we're going to remove some parts, then we're going to clean those parts, then we're going to oil those parts, and then replace those parts. I'm demonstrating this on a 2012, but this is going to work on a lot of different vintage Singer models. The tools that you're going to need are first a screwdriver that will help you take off the set screw for the stop motion wheel. We're going to need a magic marker to make some marks. We're going to need some rubbing alcohol. You can also use kerosene or lighter fluid to do some of the cleaning. And we're going to need a bunch of Q-tips. We're also going to need just a little bit of soapy water. This is just a jar of water with a couple drops of dishwashing detergent in there. We're going to need sewing machine oil, preferably with a spout so that you can apply it very precisely. We're just going to put on literally 1 or 2 drops of oil total. And then lastly, if you do not have a good grip and you're not good at pinching small things, like if you have arthritis, you might want to get a pair of bent tweezers or forceps. These are not strictly necessary, but if you've got grip issues, they may make it a little bit easier. And the last thing we're going to need is stack of magazines or a catalog or something that's about a ½ inch to an inch thick, only if you're working on a loose machine, that is a machine that's not mounted in a cabinet. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is, if you've got the machine loose or in a wooden base as opposed to in a cabinet, is we're just going to prop up one end with the stack of magazines, just to give the butt end a little elevation. This is just going to help us out. We're going to let gravity help us out by keeping the stop motion washer in place as we remove it, which you'll see in a second. If you have the machine mounted in a cabinet and you're not able to do this, don't worry. We can get around that using a Q-tip, which I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so now we're ready to start removing parts. The first thing we're going to do is take the screwdriver and we're just going to loosen the set screw. We're not going to remove it all the way. We're just going to loosen it a few turns, just enough so that we can get the stop motion wheel off. Now this is where, if you have the machine mounted in a cabinet, what I want you to do is jam a Q-tip behind the stop motion wheel and against the clamp washer that's behind it, just so that it doesn't fall out. And you'll see why in a minute. And as I loosen this, notice I'm very carefully holding this with 4 fingers. And we'll set this down to the side. And now hopefully you can see why I very carefully removed the stop motion wheel and why I am holding the washer into place. There's a bunch of chips on the inside of this hand wheel, and I guarantee you those are from people removing this and this falling out and then chipping the enamel. So we want to be careful that that doesn't happen. The other reason we want to hold this washer into place is to study its position. Now if you look at the 3 bosses or 3 dots on the washer, you'll notice that one of them is always lined up with the ear that's on this clamp washer. To either side of that particular ear, I'll always put a little dot with a magic marker on either side on the actual shaft, so that we know how to line it back up when we put it back into place. As you might have seen in the last video, this washer always has to be placed back on in a specific way, otherwise these bosses are not going to be in the correct position. So go ahead, take a magic marker and put those 2 dots on the shaft on either side of the ear that's lined up with the boss. Okay, now the next step will be to remove this washer. You can just pluck this out with your finger, but like I said before, if you don't have a good grip or if you have arthritis, you may find that the tweezers come in handy. Most of us can just pop this off with our fingers, but as you remove it, just pull it towards you and be careful that it doesn't fall and chip the hand wheel. And then we're just going to set this off to the side. Okay, now next we've got to remove the hand wheel itself, which is pretty easy. You just pull it off towards you. Every once in a while you'll have a machine that's really gunked up inside and it's going to take a little pressure to get it off, but generally if you wiggle it this way and this way, with pressure, it will eventually come off. You should be able to get it off with just your hands. Every once in a while, I'll get a machine that's really gunked up and I'll have to gently tap this off with a rubber mallet or a regular hammer wrapped heavily in a towel, but it should just pop right off like this. And then we set this off to the side. Okay, so now we're ready to start cleaning the parts that we've removed. First I'll show you the parts that you can clean with the alcohol, which is the clamp washer. You want to clean this completely on both sides and clean the rim of it using a Q-tip swabbed in some rubbing alcohol, and then give this time to dry off. Likewise, the inside of the stop motion wheel, you want to clean all of these surfaces on the inside with the rubbing alcohol to just get that old gunk off of there. However, when it comes to the hand wheel, we're actually going to switch over to the soapy water rather than the alcohol, and that's because there's enough enamel on this part that if we accidentally spill any alcohol on it, it may ruin the finish. So with the Q-tip and the soapy water, we're just going to clean two sections. One is inside the center of the balance wheel, the part that the shaft actually rides in. We want to get that nice and clean. And then secondly, we want to clean this inner metal surface, this flat surface that the washer is going to ride on top of. We want to get that nice and clean with the Q-tips. After you've done that, make sure you've given this plenty of time to dry before we put it back on, so that we're not trapping any moisture inside the machine. Okay, the next part we're going to clean is right around here on the actual machine in the shaft area. But first I want to tell you to be very cautious using the alcohol at this point, because we want to make sure that none of it drips down onto the receptacle. I should have mentioned earlier, obviously you want to have the machine unplugged at this point, because we certainly don't want any alcohol dripping onto the wiring or the receptacle. If you're clumsy and you don't trust yourself, just lay down a hand towel or something underneath that will catch any drops that fall off. As for the actual area we want to clean, you want to get your Q-tip and the rubbing alcohol, and you want to clean off the surface of this shaft all around, which is probably covered in gunk and grime. This one has already been cleaned. After we've wiped that away, you also want to clean the actual end of the shaft and just get that nice and shiny. Okay, once the cleaning is done, we're ready to start oiling. I want you to grab your oil, and we're going to put just a single drop of oil on the shaft. One drop is all we need. Please do not put more than one drop of oil here. The reason is because I've seen people over oil these machines, particularly the 2012 and the 1591, and what will happen is that when you over oil the machine, the oil can drip down into the back of the receptacle, into the back of the terminal, and destroy the wiring. I've seen this especially in a lot of these cabinet-mounted machines. And then what will end up happening is the wiring insulation will all melt out of the side, and then you've got a big problem on your hands. So think of oil as like a Band-Aid. When you have a cut on your finger, you'll put some Neosporin directly on the cut. You don't wipe it all over your hands and your arms. It's not doing you any good. It's the same thing with oil. People think more oil is better. It's not. Just one drop in the right spot is all you'll need. Okay, now there's just one more spot that we need to oil, and that's on the actual hand wheel itself. And again, all we need is a single drop of oil in the right spot, which is on this horizontal surface. And once we've dropped that in place, you can go ahead and take the clamp washer, drop that in place, and just rotate it around a little bit to circulate that oil. Again, very important that you do not over oil this part, or it's all just going to drip off of the hand wheel and go someplace it does not need to go. After you've worked that oil in a bit, you can take the washer off and we can get the machine ready to reassemble. Okay, now we're ready to put the machine back together. We start with the hand wheel, which just slides right onto the shaft. Now, because we've placed these black dots there with the magic marker, we know which way the washer goes back on. And again, if you have a cabinet-mounted machine and you were not able to prop it up on the magazines as I've done here, for this next part you may want to take a Q-tip and just hold this washer in place while we screw the stop-motion wheel back in. That's just to prevent the washer from falling out, which can be a pain in the neck. Okay, we get this tightened all the way. We will tighten up the set screw. You do not have to over tighten this, it just has to be tight enough so that it's not going to move. It's not holding anything in place, so you don't need to go nuts with this screw. Okay, now we're ready to try running the machine. Okay, now we've got the machine plugged back in. The stop motion wheel is tightened all the way, so if we go ahead and hit the gas, you'll see that everything turns over together. And if we loosen this stop motion wheel into bobbin winding mode and then hit the gas, just the balance wheel turns over. Every once in a while you may find that after you've done this and you hit the gas, things will still be a little bit stuck and the needle bar may still go up and down in bobbin winding mode. If that happens, what you can do is actually place your finger on top of the take-up lever and prevent it from moving up and down. Now, this is not really enough to hurt you or, break your finger or anything, but if you're nervous about it or if you're clumsy, just take your magic marker and place it on top of the take-up lever only when it's in bobbin winding mode, and then hit the gas, and that'll prevent the take-up lever from going up and down, and it'll force the oil to sort of circulate against the moving parts, and then after a while you'll be able to take this magic marker away and everything should work perfectly. Okay, that's it.